Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
with your host, the seer of the beer, Chris Powell.
And Laura Vosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month, we invite a guest author to read their works and talk about writing while sipping a beer especially paired to their work. Today's guest is Beth Duke. So sit back
Pop a cold one
and dive into some books
and brews.
Welcome to Books and Brews number 71. This means we have now interviewed with Books and Brews Light. What would that make it? About 105 authors we have interviewed. So to me, this is kind of big.
Yes, this is huge. This is awesome. And so what have you been doing this month, Laura, with all of those interviews on tap?
Yeah, well, we managed to squeeze in a visit from one of our sons. Between us, we have 7 boys and 3 girls. And so my son, who is in college in Wyoming, came to visit. We got down to Gatlinburg. We did some fun things. I got him out there. We were supposedly going to sell 2 of our sheep. So Michael, my son, and Larry, our farmhand, and I were out there wrangling sheep. They might not be bright, but they're very good at not being caught. So we finally caught 2 of the little ewes, 5 months old, in the sheep shelter. And 5-month-old ewes, they managed to knock the door off the sheep shelter. They wanted out. And they just threw themselves at the door until they broke it right off. Who would think that a 5-month-old sheep could do that?
Apparently ours can.
Yeah. How about you? Anything exciting?
I've been both at a number of different conferences and business trips, and then I get sick each time. And so I brought home flu, I brought home colds, I brought home all sorts of things. So I am hoping to get past that, although I have another conference coming up on the 7th of April, which I'll be doing a demo at. So I'm really hoping I don't get sick again. It's been a miserable
so far,
winter.
You've been sick every time.
Yes. So what have you been reading?
Well, let me see. I have 2 books to show here. One is the Book of Fate, I think that says. And one is called Family of Liars. Now, are you going to ask me how I liked these books?
I would like to ask you how you like these books, but you've apparently already asked yourself that.
Our guest today will be glad to know I liked hers a lot better. I actually did like these books right up until the end. And the endings were just odd. Like, how do you come up with that? How was I supposed to even guess that's where we were going? So the books themselves were good, but I would suggest rewriting the endings if I were to do it.
Well, speaking of books that probably don't need to be rewritten, who's our guest this month?
Well, just like every month, I am very excited to introduce our guest. Beth Duke is an Amazon #1 best-selling author. She is best known for writing Southern fiction, but her best-selling novel, It All Comes Back to You, has been a book club favorite. So that's kind of exciting to have your books being read by book clubs. But her readings today will be from her newest book, Anywhen, which is a sci-fi historical novel fiction about the Woodstock music and art fair of 1969. So I learned a lot reading this book. I knew almost nothing about Woodstock. So welcome, Beth.
Oh, thank you so much. It is an exciting thing to be with you.
So I'm also excited because as I've sort of pushed harder on advertising this show, people are actually starting to come to me and ask to be on the program, which I got a very nice message from Beth's publicist. Actually, quite some time ago, we were booked pretty far out when I first heard from, I think her name is Kelsey, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we always start with the first cocktail, and then we'll have your first reading and the first set of questions, and cycle and repeat. So, Chris, do you want to talk about the first drink?
Yes, and I will try not to electrocute myself on the microphone as I'm making it. So I'm inspired by each one of the readings, and I try to find cocktails and match them as best as I can to those. And the first one, I was inspired by the centrality of AI to life's experiences, combined with the ability to generate unique complements to thinking and acting by virtue of animogenesis. So this particular cocktail is the Algorithmic Amaretto Sour. And I'm going to start by putting some ice into a shaker. We will put 2 ounces of amaretto. Then we're going to get some lemon juice and throw that in there, just about an ounce. Lemon juice is a little intense, so we don't want to put too much in there, but the amaretto is very nicely sweet, and so this should end up being a nice complement to it. And then I'm going to add a total between 2 drinks of simple syrup. So again, this will give us a little bit of the sweet to go against the grain of the lemon. And there we go. And then my favorite part of this, which is part of doing what is called a dry shake. So you actually put egg white into the drink, and it makes a nice frothy, sweet complement to the drink, putting a nice foam on top of it. And so we are going to shake the heck out of this, and then hopefully we will get our nice frothy drink with this. I think that's coming up pretty well. And there we have our Algorithmic Amaretto Sour. Cheers.
It's a very good thing that we have food for my empty stomach, because I will be drinking all of this. That's a really nice flavor and just sweet enough without being cloying. So I wish you were here to share it.
Yeah, I really feel kind of left out here.
What we need to do is really get on top of things to send the recipes out in advance. I'm afraid between the farm and his job, we're kind of scrambling.
I understand, yes.
Go ahead with reading number 1.
Okay, this is the very first chapter of Anywhen. Unity SE 35.86, December 9th, 2101. As I type this on an antique laptop, a chittering monkey sits opposite me and watches, occasionally lifting a paw to his mouth and gnawing at it. I've never seen him before and likely won't again. He's an apparition, an artificial intelligence-generated manifestation of my nervousness. I'm your direct descendant, and so is this situation. So it seems a good way to introduce myself in the world I live in. The work you did at the dawn of artificial intelligence led to this incredible place well over a century later. The first known instance of animal genesis, was 2 years ago in what you'd have known as Coventry, England. A woman slammed the door of her home pod and stalked away from her husband as passers-by stared at the Bengal tiger padding along slightly behind her, baring its teeth at those in proximity. Of course, no one has seen a Bengal tiger in more than 50 years. All of Unity NE 521.5 was terrified until the truth was known. They cowered indoors as well after the tiger strolled out of sight with the oblivious, furious wife. Then, people all over Unity started having animals appear, always reflecting their moods. My neighbor, when he became eligible to begin his reproduction cycle, was accompanied everywhere by a panting Labrador retriever whose penis was exposed like a 20th century lipstick. A lady who lives by the town square walks to the park alongside a sloth. Her male companion occasionally appears with a menacing wolf. I think the monkey is here because I finally decided to sit down and write to you. I'm generating text on paper with this computer and printer my friend Daniel found and persuaded to work. These days, we all find the animals amusing, if a little embarrassing sometimes. I thought you'd be interested in them as well as an illustration of how far artificial intelligence has come since the days of your research. I'm called Baisy, rhymes with Daisy. I'm almost 32 years old, and you are my M5, my great-great-great-grandmother on the maternal side. You are a legend to me for so many reasons, Kelly Jean Adams, especially your experience at Woodstock. Does it surprise you we know all about that? Well, the year I was born was the centennial anniversary of the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, of all things hippie, peace, and flower power. Much of the world went crazy in 2069 with celebrations. There were hollows on every town square of many of the original performances, and singer-actors hired to imitate Janis Joplin, Santana, and Joan Baez. With modern prosthetics, you'd never have known the difference. That's where my name comes from, Joan Baez Smith, Baisy for short. My mother wore a beaded headband and bell-bottom jeans. She kept a pink flower tucked behind her ear, accenting long, straight purple hair through her entire pregnancy. We celebrate every truth your generation realized, and I want you to know we've achieved the world you dreamed of. You began it all, grandmother. From crude computers to the society we've achieved through artificial intelligence and human compassion. There's no hunger here. There's no war. The average lifespan is 150 years, thanks to our ability to eradicate disease and combat aging at a cellular level. To you, I'd look about 17, and I won't even begin my reproduction cycle until I'm at least 35 or 40. Our lives hold promise like no generations before.
This is a really neat reading. And in fact, I was thinking when I looked over them, you did an excellent job of really picking readings that fit well and summarize a lot of the story. Before we dig into this, you're best known for Southern fiction. What sets Southern fiction apart?
Well, my books are almost all love letters to Alabama in one way or another. I began writing when I was living in Florida. I don't think it's a coincidence I had just seen the movie Sweet Home Alabama with my best friend, and Marianne loved it, and I wanted to get up and walk out in the middle of the movie. I mean, I was appalled by the Southern stereotypes. I don't have a crazy uncle who fires a Confederate cannon every afternoon. I've never had to use the word "you have a baby" in a bar. Yeah, I really walked away from that movie with an even stronger impression that Alabama has been misportrayed and mischaracterized in so many media presentations. So I started writing short stories that took place in Alabama, even though I was still living in Florida. And I tried to introduce the world to things that people may not know about Alabama. The Marshall Space Center, beautiful mountain vistas, warm, well-educated, intelligent people, and things like the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, which is not to be or not to be, I'm fixing to decide. So that's really where the Southern fiction comes from. I think Southern fiction is characterized by warmth and family, a lot of generational sagas, maybe a little magic here and there, not necessarily magical realism, but I have told book groups before, I don't think any book I write will ever not have a magical old lady in it, simply because of my relationship with my grandmother. And those relationships are very, very strong in the South, and that's certainly a part of it.
I like that you're bringing up the issue of stereotypes. Now, yes, a lot of people on the East and West Coast want to mock the Midwest, but even more Alabama. And you and I were talking earlier today about Huntsville. That's what is that, Chris? Huntsville is the highest IQ average in the entire United States.
Highest per capita of PhDs in the entire United States.
Yeah.
Well, per capita, that's a little bit there. It's not the highest total,
okay,
but the highest per capita number of them.
Capita. I can easily believe that. It's such a center of commerce and industry, and we're very proud of Huntsville and what it's become primarily over the past 15 years. Its growth has been exponential, and obviously there are some very important businesses located there. You have your defense contractors primarily, but also Boeing and a number of other businesses located in Huntsville. It's just a really cool place.
Yeah. One of my first, I actually lived briefly in Mississippi in Biloxi, but I can remember years ago seeing an editorial cartoon that was Miss Alabama with her sash, like she's in a pageant. And she just looked awful. Her hair is everywhere. She's got these snaggle teeth, and she had like 6 kids around her. And at the time, I had maybe 4 kids at the time. But I had a lot of friends with big families, and I thought it was insulting to Alabama. It was insulting to women with children. So I'm really happy with what you're doing to portray it as you know it,
Well,
which
thank
is no doubt far more accurate.
more accurate. And it's funny that you mentioned Mississippi, because if Alabama makes a joke, it's generally about Mississippi and vice versa. Everyone has to have someone
Right.
to rag on. So I get that. But I just have a general respect for the people of the South.
Mhm.
She is full of warm and welcoming people who are like Chris was just talking about. We have a lot of extremely intelligent people, and I think there's a very different version of Alabama, both in geography and people, than what most people understand. I mean, when my friends first visited me from Florida, they were expecting completely flat land and people out working them with mules. Wow.
And they didn't find it.
Mountains and waterfalls and all this gorgeous scenery in the northeast part of the state, and I'm just really proud of that. This is where my roots are, and we returned here about 15 years ago. So I'm happy to be in my home state. And I can't give too much away, but I did find a way to incorporate Alabama into this latest book, Anywhen, but I don't want to disclose too much.
I read it long enough ago, I don't remember, but I am really glad that I got to read the whole book. I really enjoyed it. So Kelly, the M5 of Baisy, is working in AI. This is science fiction. It's kind of historical fiction. What inspired this complete change from your normal writing?
As you know, write Southern fiction, women's fiction, and my genre is generally upmarket women's fiction. And this was a departure for me in that way, in terms of the setting, but it's still women's fiction. It's still a young woman's emotional journey and inner transformation through external events that take place. It's just this one happens to incorporate time travel and Woodstock. But it's really just like all my other books. I think the highest compliment I received from an early reviewer was that I have loved all of Beth's other books, and this is so different, but it still reads like a Beth Duke book. Mm-hmm. So despite the very different venue, I think it comes across as women's fiction above all else. I don't like to say science fiction too often because I'm not Blake Crouch. I'm not a lot of authors who are very well versed in quantum mechanics. My quantum mechanics are a little rusty. But time travel for me is a lovely device to be able to tell a story in an interesting way. So I don't really get into the mechanics of time travel or anything too sci-fi or tech. That's not me.
Right. Well, it worked well. And I agree with you that I wouldn't really think of this so much as sci-fi because you don't see a whole lot of the future that Baisy comes from. But why Woodstock? Did you have a prior fascination with that?
I think so. I think I've always had this fascination with Woodstock. I obviously wasn't around to be there, but I have always thought it was such a stunning cultural moment in this country. If you look at the 60s and how turbulent they were and how we had just emerged from the 50s, which was such a time of conservatism, and young people essentially, girls went from wearing long skirts and sweater sets to mini skirts and boots in a very short period of time. Mm-hmm. And music was obviously revolutionary. The drug scene was a big part of younger people's lives. And you had the Vietnam War, which loomed large over everything else. And the protests and the counterculture, the social struggles, racial strife, all of that was brewing and boiling over in the 60s. And then you have almost 500,000 people, very young people, gather peacefully for 3 days, despite the most agonizing conditions for a lot of them, between the weather and the food shortages. And I just thought it was amazing that they all got along and helped each other and shared. When I started interviewing people who had actually been at Woodstock, some of the people I interviewed had extremely different experiences from one end of the spectrum to the other, but all of them talked about the united common thread that ran through it, which was that everyone helped each other. Everyone took care of each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So I've always been a little fascinated with it and with the moment that it represents in American history.
Right. Now, you reference both in this reading and on your blog this question that Woodstock was seeking a utopia, or they had a lot of members, the attendees, had this ideal of a utopia. And the question, has Baisy's time achieved that? And she believes, as she writes this letter, that her time has accomplished what her great-great-great-grandmother wanted. Do you think that they did?
You know, I do. As you read the novel, some things are disclosed about Baisy's civilization that are a little different than you might have thought at the beginning of the book at its onset. But it is a time of complete peace around the world. There is no more hunger. People tend to share equally, and there is plenty for all. And all these advances have been made in society that I think the counterculture, the hippie generation yearned for. So I think in many ways they did realize it.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. I had a slightly different thought about that. She experienced emotions that I don't think she had. And this brings me to this other question. So often we envision the future as having everybody's eating these little pills. You know, we don't have to cook food anymore. And these pills or cubes, I think, what does she call them? NutriCubes?
Yes.
And these NutriCubes, or whatever it is in the individual book, are perfect, you know, perfect nutrition, et cetera, and so forth. And yet she finds they're also squelching her emotions. So did you intend that to say nothing's ever going to be perfect? Or what was your intent with that?
Yeah, I should back up and say they're Nourish Cubes, because NutriCube is actually a trademark name, so I use Nourish Cube instead. Okay. But, you know, I did want to introduce that later in the book, that it was not quite as perfect and wonderful as Baisy had thought, because there's a lot more impact of these Nourish Cubes than what she'd been led to believe her entire life. So yes, there is another side of that. But I really wasn't trying to make a broad statement. I like for readers to interpret things for themselves. A book is, you know, it's black marks on dead trees until a reader picks it up and brings it to life, and they imbue it with the characteristics that they see and feel. So it's up to the reader to decide whether that was a utopian society or whether things were a little bit different.
Right. And I have, just by coincidence, or maybe not, I've talked to two authors probably in the last 2 or 3 months who both had very strong feelings about AI. One was very enthusiastic, a huge supporter. The other said, I hate it, never going to use it, it's terrible, you know, taking our creativity, whatever else he said. Where do you fall on that? What are the good and the bad of AI?
Well, obviously, as a writer, it's an extreme concern to me, the idea that human intelligence and creativity could be replaced in the writing world. And that's something that a lot of authors are up in arms over, and I'm certainly concerned over as well, because it is an emerging technology that we have to concern ourselves with. You know, major retailers and Amazon are currently saying that they will not list an AI product, or if they do, it has to be labeled as such. But it's a little scary what could get through those cracks. So, you know, in terms of creativity, I do believe that human imagination cannot be replaced, at least not by the current state of artificial intelligence. But my idea was more to talk about what AI could do for our lifestyles in general, not in terms of replacing creativity and art, but in terms of making our lives easier. And I do believe that could happen. I think there's going to be exponential progress in that area over the next 30, 40 years that will be unbelievable. It was very refreshing to me to hear from a gentleman early on who read this, who worked his entire career in AI, and said he was so glad to pick up a book that portrayed a future that was positively impacted by artificial intelligence, as opposed to the dystopian version that we tend to see and be concerned about.
Right. And I think it's an interesting, to me, AI is like anything else. It's a tool. It can be used for bad. It can be used for good. You do some work in AI, don't you?
I do a tremendous amount in AI. So yes, AI to me is cool, but we use it for a ton of different things. So that just is what it is.
Well, I've I rarely buy subscriptions to anything, but I have a subscription to Suno. I've been creating, not writing, but creating a lot of music. And I find it fascinating, the interplay between what's in your head that you want to happen. Creativity is here, and the computer will spit something out, and maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But then you can tweak it to your heart's content. You can try over and over. You can change the lyrics. You can change how you describe the music that you want it to, the style of music. So I find it interesting and I find it a lot of fun, but I also understand the concerns.
Yes, and like you said, it's a tool, and it's a tool that we can harness if it's done properly. There is nothing, even at this moment, that can rival the human brain in terms of sophistication. And I like to cling to that, I think, as a creative, as an artist.
Right. We're ready for drink number 2.
Awesome. Well, and speaking of, Woodstock and Utopia, and coming almost from that generation, I was 6 years old at the time that Woodstock happened. I would say that Utopia to them would have been just 2 simple things. One would have been a portage on the full, and the other one would have been a lot less mud. And, Utopia then would have been, good for them, in addition to the wonderful music that was playing. And so the second cocktail that we have is, we're at Woodstock. So this cocktail is inspired by everything you would kind of experience in that milieu. And this is the Peace, Love, and Music cocktail. And this is actually, I think, a pretty fun recipe. There's a lot of fun things in this. And what we're going to start off with is we actually have some mint, some peppermint from our garden. And we've already muddled this. And it's in the bottom of my shaker. And now I'm going to add a number of fun things to it. The first is vodka, because it's a nice neutral base for a lot of the other flavors that are going to be coming in on this. So we start off with the drink with about 1.5 ounces of vodka, which will give this this cocktail a nice kick, since many of the other ingredients are much more herbal or natural from that standpoint. Although I think vodka is pretty natural too. The next thing we're going to put in is about 1/2 ounce of elderflower liqueur, which in this case is Saint Germain. This is one of my very favorite liqueurs to make a drink with. It has a very nice floral bouquet that it adds to almost any cocktail, which is nice. Now we're going to add some lemon juice to it. So about 1 ounce of fresh lemon juice. Next, I made a couple of things before class. One of them is some honey syrup. This is 1-to-1 honey to hot water, and then I let it cool to room temperature. So we're going to add about 1/2 ounce of honey syrup to this cocktail. And the next thing we have is a chamomile tea, which I also made and then let cool to room temperature. And I'm going to put in 2 ounces of herbal tea into this. So again, we're getting a lot of interesting and wonderful interplay of flavors. And most bars I've ever been to don't really have this kind of a stable of of ingredients. And we've already got the mint leaves that are in there. And so now, Laura, if you would hand me the bucket of ice. The ice is somewhat off the stage right at the moment. I will add some ice to the shaker in order to give the drink something to shake against. This one I will not have to shake as vigorously as the egg white for its cold shake, or dry shake, excuse me. So here I have all the ingredients. I'm putting them into the shaker and shaking it away. Then we have a highball glass, which I throw a decent amount of ice in. Keep this cocktail nice and cold. And I garnish it with a lemon wheel, because that will be nice and peaceful and festive, of course, for a Woodstock, a Woodstock cocktail. Again, I'm trying not to electrocute myself. And now we're pouring this mint-infused herbal cocktail into our highball glass. And if I was able to find a grocery store locally, I mean, we're in a very rural part of eastern Tennessee. If I was able to find edible flowers at the grocery store, you would garnish this drink with some edible flowers as well. So now you really have the flower power generation going for a Woodstock cocktail. So here is our peace, love, and music cocktail.
I'm in the wrong hand.
Cheers.
We actually do have some ice cubes in the fridge that have flowers in them. I had made that for somebody else's interview that interview never worked out due to a recent cross-country move and things. But
that almost tastes like a slightly flavored fizzy water.
I think it has a nice, very summery kind of an aspect.
Yep.
We're ready for reading number 2.
Okay, well, right on, Chris. That sounds like a great drink. And I'm really pleased that you didn't utilize Boone's Farm, which is mentioned in the book, because that would have been awful. So now we're at the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, Bethel, New York, August 15th, 1969. Jack poked his head into the van, a corona of late-day pink sky shining above him like a halo. "Do you have any clothes she can borrow until hers dry? She's about your size," he said. Kelly blinked at him and swept some errant hair behind one ear. She couldn't see the girl from her seat. "No, I don't. I only have one extra outfit. Try Laura." She frowned at his intrusion and held up her notebook. "Why did you bring her here? Surely she came to the festival with someone. It's not our problem." Jack swung his head back and forth, glaring at her. "Kelly, underneath that math-encrusted exterior, there's got to be a heart somewhere." "That's not the point, Jack," Kelly answered. "Find her friends and let them hold her hand while she goes through her head trip or whatever it is. She'll be okay. Maybe take her to the stage and let them announce she's lost. You shouldn't get involved." Kelly looked back at her work and waited for Jack to leave. "You can't be serious. There's probably 500,000 people here," Jack replied. "It's useless to try to find anyone. Come on, Kelly, she's a kid. Probably the age of one of my students. She's alone, and the way she talks, I don't think English is her native language. She says she grew up on a Sioux reservation in South Dakota. She ran away from home. Something's not right. I think somebody drugged her, actually. Maybe whoever drove her here. She's not safe down there." Jack glanced to his right, where the girl was no doubt dripping in her blanket out of Kelly's view. "We were swimming, and she suddenly appeared in the middle of the pond, where it's pretty deep, splashing like crazy and yelling about her stuff floating away. She had some kind of candy or something with her, and the people around us were catching and eating it, laughing at her. She kept grabbing at some wet papers that were useless and illegible, and then she started crying. Who goes swimming with a suede purse full of papers, Kelly? She needs a safe place until whatever drug she's on wears off." Kelly set her notebook down slowly and deliberately, then crossed her arms to address Jack. "Take her to a medical tent, then. I don't do drugs. I don't understand people who do drugs. I'm not the person to talk to about this. Where's Eric?" Eric and Kristen were too preoccupied with each other to notice. They're still down the hill. "Listen to me, Kelly. I swam over and helped her to shallow water, and she was naked, which a lot of people were, but she was trying to cover herself with her hands and all embarrassed. Her clothes were in her purse. She kept saying she had to get dressed, but her blouses and jeans and shoes were soaked. She insisted she had to put them on anyway. Some lady saw how upset she was and wrapped a blanket around her. They went in the woods, and she came out wearing these wet clothes you could see through, clutching her purse. Come on, she needs help." He leaned closer to Kelly, glancing behind him. There was a black woman at the edge of the water. This girl stopped dead in her tracks as we slogged out, staring at her with her mouth hanging open. Never mind, she's still butt naked. She seemed mesmerized. She broke away from me, went over and touched the woman's arm, stroking it and going on and on about how beautiful her skin is, like she's never seen it before. "That's the woman who threw a blanket around her and walked her into the woods," he whispered.
So, what was it? Woodstock has captured the attention, the imagination for 60 years now?
Pretty much.
Why was it so unique, especially considering there were other similar concerts, gatherings?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the Mac Daddy of all or I should say Mac Mama, maybe, with the spirit of Woodstock, of all concerts. And I've talked to a whole lot of people who participated. I've spent a great deal of time actually at the site of the concert with the executive director of the museum there. And he believes that it was such a spirit of gathering with like-minded others, to have just 2 or 3 days away from the noise, away from all of the issues they were dealing with. I mean, we're talking about 17, 16, sometimes 15-year-old kids up to 20. Those are the ages of the people who attended Woodstock. They weren't necessarily your stereotypical hippies at all. I certainly have met more than one who just came as a typical 17-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid, who had nothing to do with hippie or drug culture at all. They just, the Vietnam War loomed large, the draft loomed large, and there were so many issues pressing on them that I think they just wanted a break from the world with people who thought the way they did. And of course, the music was a huge attraction as well.
Right.
So it's a profound moment. Many people gathering together at that point in time, and so much turmoil in this country.
Right. Now, one thing that really jumped out, especially in this scene, and it comes out throughout the book, I felt like Baisy, and I should not forget that name because it rhymes with Daisy, and our sheeps are Maisie and Daisy. I'm sorry, sheep is plural sheep. They're Maisie and Daisy, and Crinkles.
You can call them sheepies to get around
sheeps, whatever. If I'm going to live on a farm, I should know what the animals are called. It seems to me that Baisy is, in a way, very naive. Is that sort of a function of this utopia that she has grown up in?
I do think that's true. And it's so interesting to me to juxtapose Baisy's, as you put it, naivete with the fact that she's from this incredibly sophisticated civilization. She can literally sit down and learn Lakota Sioux in a matter of seconds or maybe minutes. She has access to all this knowledge. She's from a very advanced futuristic society. Yet when she steps into the 1969 world, she's so completely out of place and so out of her element that it's a really interesting juxtaposition to me. She's going back to a much simpler time, yet she's lost. She doesn't understand the metaphors of the language, which is kind of a humorous device that we use throughout the book to bring a laugh here and there. And she mangles most of them that she attempts. She mangles the slang that she attempts.
Right.
And I think her naivete is what makes the book work. It's essentially an outsider story.
Mm-hmm.
Story.
I agree with you. It works. And I thought she also experienced a lot of disillusionment. She had grown up almost worshiping this great-great-great-grandmother who was so much a part of the AI that created the world she lives in. And she's expecting them to just be like that. And she's expecting, there will be this connection and her grandmother will be so excited to meet her. And what does she do? She's probably drugged up. Get rid of her. Take her away. No, I'm not sharing my clothes with her.
Yeah, and it's devastating. It's absolutely crushing to Baisy, Sarah at Woodstock. She came there thinking she was going to have this instant relationship with her great-great-grandmother, great-great-great, and Kelly won't even listen to her, won't even tolerate the idea that she is who she says she is, and what a huge disappointment that was for her. So I think she goes off and decides to make the best she can of the festival. She knows what to expect. She knows the music she's going to get to dance to, and accidentally falls in love along the way. I don't want to give too much away, but that's certainly a part of it.
That's the danger of time travel, huh? Right. You brought up a couple of times this issue of sharing, and also the idea that this was a question. The more I read about Woodstock preparing for this interview, they were talking about how it unified people, and I was reading views from both sides. People who hated it thought it was loud and dirty, and people who loved it said it unified. I was kind of curious, did it really unify people who had been opposed, or was it more just unity for those who already agreed on these things?
That's a wonderful question to ponder. And the thing that strikes me most is that you had these kids who were there protesting the war, who were anti-government, who were afraid of the man, who resented and couldn't stand Richard, who the government was just the antithesis of all that was good, yet you had army helicopters flying in food and supplies for these kids. You had townspeople who were horrified that these dirty, nasty hippies were gathering in their area and ruining everything, but they all came together and made sandwiches for these kids and sent them over. And it was this beautiful transformation, I think, at least a tolerance for these young people to come into the community and maybe a new understanding of who they were and what they were trying to say. And the idea that they all banded together to feed these kids when probably 5 times as many as should have been there came, and they had a collapse of the food supply. I thought that was lovely. So I think you have a unity among the community around Woodstock as well as those within.
And I think that's a really important message, especially for today, that here they were not wanting these kids there, viewing them as all sorts of awful, and yet they're people, they're hungry, they took care of them. And I think there's a lot of division today, and we could all learn a lesson from that, hey, these are still people, they're still your brothers and sisters in the human race.
Amen. And I think that's one of the reasons I was moved to write this book now, because we do have such division, and we all are going to either rise together or fall together. I believe that with all my heart. And you don't have to agree with your neighbor, but love your neighbor, do unto others. I think these are very valuable lessons for us right now. And so Woodstock was a particularly shining moment to present to the world, I think.
Right. Can you tell us, you talk about art and music making the world a better place. Now, I grew up very much with, it wasn't my attitude, but the attitude being told to me, it's important to use your brain for, great scientific research, medical research, being a doctor, being a lawyer, something high-powered and intellectual. Let's just say music was not on the list, and I became a musician. I taught music for 32 years. I write books. None of this was what was valued in my family growing up. But talk a little bit about why music and art really do matter.
Well, first you said it was important to use your brain. I thought it was most important to use your words.
In my family, just the brain.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's a very important point. And I also think that's generational. I think there's kind of a shift now in our attitudes toward creative people and the value they bring to the world. But, some of us were brought up to believe that we had to get a college education and secure a particular type of degree and pursue a particular type of career so we'd be financially successful and secure. And now we encourage our creative children in a different direction. And I'm so glad for that. There are so many attitudes that have shifted so far from, say, the 60s and 70s. One thing we refer to in the book is the attitudes toward women. I think you can see Kelly's struggle as a young woman working in computer science and in research at MIT. So many things have changed so dramatically. And one of them is that we have a greater appreciation for creative minds, for music and literature and art. And I would also point out that music has been a vehicle for protest since time began. It was nothing new at Woodstock. It was nothing new in Elizabethan England. It was nothing new probably in the caves of Ur. I think music and lyrics have moved people and moved their hearts in a huge way for centuries. I spoke to someone the other day and told them, take a look at Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl halftime show, whether you love the music or not. If that doesn't show the transformative power of music, I don't know what does. Because there were so many people who were so opposed to that presentation and came away from it thinking maybe I should look into this further and digging down a little bit. I just think that's wonderful.
That's great. We are already on to cocktail number 3. It goes fast.
Indeed. And I'm assuming my ice bucket is somewhere nearby. There we go.
This is going to be a fun cocktail. And actually, just riffing off of the idea of unity at Woodstock, 2 of the things that I remember from the news coverage were that way more people showed up than they were expecting. So parking was an absolute nightmare. Some people had 10-mile walks up these, 1.5-lane country roads to get to get to it. And then the other thing was that the tickets that they sold, people just overran the festival. So at some point, the ticket holders were, left behind, and people just showed up all the time, and went to this festival. So that was kind of neat, but not necessarily well planned or orchestrated. So here we have a cocktail that's inspired by all this talk of math equations, and also just because we're riffing off the fact that we just celebrated Pi Day about a week or so ago. And so, for me, as a mathematician, primarily, that was as part of my history as a serial student, mathematics and engineering was my first degree. And so anytime I get to just shout about equations, I'm in a happy place. At this point, that rarely happens on Books and Brews. So what we're going to have here is the Pina Colada Pi cocktail. And, it's another inspiration from pi, the ratio of a circumference of a circle to its diameter. And this is, sort of gives a playful kind of nod to pi as the Pina Colada. So the first thing we're going to start with, this is going to be a bit of a frozen cocktail. So we're going to fill a blender with some ice. And, when we, of course, put the blender going here, we're going to cut that out because it's going to be, from the recording, because it's going to be very loud. But first of all, we'll throw in some ice in our blender. And the next thing we're going to have is some pineapple juice. And so it'll be about 3 ounces of pineapple juice for this cocktail. And so we're throwing in our pineapple juice here. And interestingly, sometimes you think that the mixers are going to have higher volume than the alcohol, but we essentially are going to throw in more rum than we did pineapple juice. So this is a very nice cocktail from the standpoint that you can listen to some Kenny Chesney music and sit on the beach and not have any cares in the world if you were to have this cocktail. So for each drink, we're throwing in about 4 ounces of rum into this thing. So again, that'll get cut a little bit with the ice, but on the flip side, this is going to be a very nice drink. And because we're in that tropical mentality, we're going to throw in some lime juice, of course, instead of our lemon juice this time. Just about 1 ounce for each of the cocktails. And now we're going to throw this on the blender.
That's another really good one. Go ahead with reading number 3.
I just want to say I'm really jealous because that's my favorite frozen drink. And only a mathematician, our son is a mathematician, would find the pie in Pina Colada. So that's great. So we're at Woodstock again in this excerpt, and Baisy is calling herself Sarah. I feel like I should point that out. Sarah took a deep breath and closed her eyes. I've waited so long to tell you this, she said. I should start with my real name. It's Joan Baez Smith, after your favorite singer, but everyone calls me Baisy. I was born in 2069, the centennial of your far-out Woodstock festival experience. I'm almost 32 years old, even though I know I look younger to you. She opened her eyes and turned them to Kelly, who stared in incomprehension for a few seconds before getting to her feet and leaving the tent. Kelly stepped into the night air, still saturated with marijuana, cow patties, and the occasional waft from the portlets, so brown you could almost see it. She regretted the lack of a door to slam on the tent. The insult was almost too much to bear. Prank the math nerd, tell her you're from the future. Try to convince someone profoundly rooted in reality you're a supernatural visitor. She wondered if Jack had suggested Sarah say something so absurd. It would appeal to his juvenile sense of humor, she decided. It was probably him and his pot-addled brain. Sarah made no attempt to follow her. Good. Kelly walked to the van to sit in the front passenger seat and wait for Jack. She listened to Kristen's soft snoring as she stared at the mass of humanity below, formulating the exact words she'd used to tell Jack off. He deserved it for such a stupid stunt. She wished she could sharpen her anger into something to hurt him, to hurt Sarah, but all it did was cause her to cry quietly, as alone as she'd ever been, with 500,000 people. She thought back over the afternoon working in the notebook with Sarah. She'd never met anyone who enjoyed mathematics as much as she did, and now their friendship was ruined. She closed her eyes and laid her head back. Kelly jumped as Sarah tapped on the driver's side window, a wide-eyed ghost. Kelly watched her fumble with the door handle until she leaned across to open it from the inside and pushed the door outward. Sarah climbed into the driver's seat, the overhead light briefly illuminating her wet cheeks. She sniffled, and Kelly prepared herself for a pitiful apology designed to elicit her sympathy. She had no intention of offering any to this strange girl. "I am very sorry," Sarah said. "What I thought would amuse you just made you angry, and that is lame. Let me show you something." She reached into her handbag and produced a plastic-encased South Dakota driver's license with her photo. "This is who I am, Sarah Sandoval. I'm 19, like it says there. I apologize for my crazy story. It was not funny. Could we please start over?" Kelly handed the license back. "Why didn't you show me this in the first place?" "I should have," Sarah replied. "I tried to tell you I grew up on Pine Ridge Reservation. I tried to tell you my real name, and you didn't believe me. It's my fault for showing off with the equations. I thought it would be cool and far out to make myself exciting, a person from the future, because you seemed to think it was impossible I knew those things." Sarah swiped at her eyes. "I'm truly sorry. I wasn't trying to trick you, just entertain you. I want us to be friends and have a good time together here." Sarah reached deep into her handbag like Mary Poppins and extracted a bottle of Kelly's wine and 2 paper cups, handing one to Kelly. "Let's drink this together while we wait for Jack to walk back. We both need to relax. Isn't this supposed to help you relax?" Kelly shrugged her shoulders, took the bottle and twisted off the cap, then poured wine into each of their cups. She handed one to Sarah, who sniffed and gazed into the cup like it was some rare vintage.
I find that just such a moving scene, too. You know, again, it comes out how badly she wants to be friends with this person she's idolized, and nothing's working. One of the common threads, going back to this idea of sharing, when you talk to these people who must have been at Woodstock, 50, 60 years ago, so they would have been quite elderly, did you end up getting the impression that that experience and this sharing and caring for each other, that it really impacted their lives and lasted throughout their lives?
I do think it did. I think Woodstock ushered in a generation of philanthropy and service agencies that had been unknown before that in the United States. I think that spirit carried forward gradually, and I think the people who were there and witnessed it walked away feeling as though they could make a positive effort for the future. I think there was a transformative quality in the music and the shared experience that they all seem to refer to in one way or another. So yes, I think they did go forward with that.
That's wonderful. It's always a question, you know, are people caught up in the moment, or is it really a profound lasting change? Now, I was interested to see that you have, is it Randy Owens, lead singer of Alabama, has given you a blurb?
Randy Owen, yes. I will tell you, my first book was called Delaney's People. It came out in 2011. And my husband and I went to see the group Alabama in Nashville at the Grand Ole Opry. And on the way home, we stopped at the Alabama Museum, and I managed to find a piece of paper on display that had Randy Owen's address. So I decided to send him a copy of my book and didn't think I would ever hear from him. And one morning, I did a radio interview. I was sitting there just giddy with excitement because I'd done a radio interview. It was really the first I'd done. And I got an email from Randy Owen's wife, Kelly, and she asked if they could order some copies because Randy really loved the book and wanted to give copies as a gift, signed copies of the book. And while I'm talking to her, he is in the background and told her to give him the phone. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there already giddy and excited from this radio interview, and Randy Owen's famous voice comes over the phone. And he started telling me how much he had loved the book and that he read a passage from it to his children at Thanksgiving or Father's Day. I can't remember which. And I heard this man, this voice I've heard all my life, reading my words, which was just incredible. So I get goosebumps talking about that. And afterward, he very generously gave me a quote to use as a blurb on my books, which is what you saw on the website.
That's a great story.
You know, the only promo that might exceed that for your books, we have to get the guy who sings bass for the Oak Ridge Boys.
Oh,
to do a promo
yes,
for you.
yes. And then we have to get him saying Elvira.
Yeah, absolutely. And ironically, my son-in-law is distantly related to him, but I haven't been able to make that happen yet.
Oh, well, when you do, give us a call. You've done very well for yourself as an author. What would you say are the top 2 or 3 keys to your success?
Well, thank you for saying that. Certainly my best known work over the years is It All Comes Back to You. And I was very fortunate and very grateful that that book took off and sold hundreds of thousands of copies within its first 3 years. I think there were a number of factors that contributed to that. First of all, you're a reader too. You know that word of mouth is the most important thing. And I had book clubs who contacted me and wanted me to join them via Zoom or Skype or whatever we were using at the time. They told other book clubs that they'd really enjoyed the book, and it kind of spread from Maine to Hawaii to Quebec. We just had people all over the country and in Canada reading the book. I think, honestly, I mentioned Sweet Home Alabama. Didn't mention anything about my not being a huge fan of Reese Witherspoon's, but ironically, at the time It All Comes Back to You came out, Reese Witherspoon had just selected Where the Crawdads Sing for her book club selection, and it was obviously just a wildfire around the world. Everyone was reading Where the Crawdads Sing, and Amazon picked up on whatever was causing people to read that book for book club and then buy my book, probably because it was also Southern fiction. So they began advertising Where the Crawdads Sing because their algorithm picked up on it as a package with It All Comes Back to You and presenting it as a package deal. So I kind of rode the back of a crawdad to early exposure for that book, and it was huge. I think another factor, honestly, is that COVID came along at the height of my book's popularity, and I think that probably made sales skyrocket even more because people were home, people were reading. So those things kind of combined in a perfect storm for me. And the book it continues to sell around the world in English and has been translated for some European distribution as well. I actually did a book signing in Croatia, if you can believe that. Yeah. In November of last year, we were in Zagreb doing a book signing for It All Comes Back to You, which is Savitizvrate. I totally mangled that, but that's what it is in Croatian.
That's good, though.
Yeah, and I think that was a huge help to me for that, which was my third novel to take off the way it did. And then I had a book that I wrote independently of that afterward that people really enjoyed. And then I wrote a sequel to It All Comes Back to You. And those have kind of found the same audience that It All Comes Back to You did.
Well, I experienced a similar thing. I had actually never heard of Diana Gabaldon when I started writing my books. And as I talked to people about them, their time travel to Scotland, although medieval Scotland, people kept going, "Oh, did you copy Diana Gabaldon?" And I was like, "Who?" But it was just dumb luck that I happened to write a book with 5 books with the same elements at the same time that she was so big. So
Yours is far better.
Yeah, well, I know you're biased because you couldn't marry her.
Right. Yeah, that was my first concern.
Right. But yeah, sometimes dumb luck, and that doesn't mean it's only dumb luck. Obviously, you wrote very good books, but it helps to be in the right place at the right time. So
yeah, I was just going to say right place, right time, and I have to read your books. I absolutely love the Outlander series, so I will be on to that for sure.
Yeah, I got a huge boost because I never really went on Diana Gabaldon forums, but I'm told that a lot of people on those forums were recommending my books as what to read if you like Diana Gabaldon. So, and in fact, I loved your wall of all the pictures of people reading your books because I've kind of done the same thing over the years, as I call it, who's reading Bluebells. So I've got a guy holding the book and reading it while he's grilling with the other hand. I've got a kid on a skateboard. I actually have a picture of Diana Gabaldon reading the book because we were both at Amelia Island and Sasquatch.
Not many people have caught Sasquatch.
Right.
Let alone
reading my book.
Yes.
So where can people find you online?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you, I'm dying to read your books now.
That's good.
The easiest place to find me is my website, which is bethduke.com. Obviously, most of my book sales are through Amazon, but my books are available through any retailer, and they're in fine bookstores everywhere. If they're not on the shelf, they can certainly be ordered. But yeah, go to bethduke.com. There's a lot of stuff on my website. I'm really proud of it because, like you said, we have the gallery of the most beautiful readers in the world that represent just basically a fraction of the book clubs I've met with, but they're all there and represented when I was able to get a photo.
So do you have any upcoming events?
I don't have anything that would be particularly like nationally appealing. I have some local stuff coming up. We have Cantina Book Club is the next podcast I'm doing, which is surprisingly another one where we drink along with the podcast. So I like that. That'll be a lot of fun. But just mainly looking forward to meeting with more book clubs. I have some book clubs scheduled for Zooms and getting the word out about Anywhen. I so appreciate the opportunity to tell people about this book.
You can find me, you can find us at booksandbrews.net. We have our YouTube channel, which is the @ books and brews spelled out. You can find me at lauravosica.com, our sponsor, gabrielshornpress.com, where you can find lots of great books by lots of authors.
Or you can find me next to my favorite author.
That'd be your favorite author. Yeah.
Right. I sometimes tease him. He told me how much he likes Wendy Webb's books, and one day he just overdid it. I was like, why don't you marry her? So.
Yes, I'm at the end of a limb. There's a leaf at the end of the limb, and I'm 10 feet beyond that, thinking, I'm so far out on the limb, that there's going to be another interesting guest next month. And I'm gonna hazard a guess that it just might be the case. Perhaps you could tell us who's going to be our guest next month.
Say it every month. I sound like it's just a line, but it is true every month. I am excited about next month's guest.
She's excited.
I like this because I'm guessing his name is Polish or Czech, so he's given me the pronunciation.
Coming next month, Michael Modzelewski grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, the son of a famous NFL football player with the Cleveland Browns, known as Ed, Big Mo, Modzelewski. Michael graduated with a degree in English literature. He is the author of 5 books, including Inside Passage, about a 2-year stay on a wilderness island in the Inside Passage to Alaska. After living dateless on the wild island, Michael was chosen a Bachelor of the Month by Cosmopolitan magazine. Mr. November received 5,000 letters from women around the world, dated many, and that's how he met his amazing wife. His resultant book, Wildlife, The Misadventures of a Cosmo Bachelor, twice landed him as a featured guest on The Oprah Winfrey Show. Mojo's latest book, his first novel, A Long Way Home, is set in Namibia, Southern Africa. It is about a famous lost Hollywood actor who learns the meaning of life from a native African girl.
Cheers.